Hey, American Literature students, welcome. It is Monday, May the 4th, and it is the final week of online assignments. Woohoo! I'm sure you're excited about that. I'm sure you're glad that we're approaching the end of our time digitally. Hopefully, we'll be back in the fall. Anyway, today we're going to talk about the writing assignments that you're going to complete over the next couple of days. Now, there is no final essay for this semester, so there's not going to be any final essay that goes in the final exam spot in Veracross. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to have you write 2 comparative analysis paragraphs. So that is going to be your final assignment for the fourth quarter and the second semester. And you're going to create 1 comparative analysis paragraph today, and you're going to create a second one tomorrow. And the focus of these comparative analysis paragraphs, of course, are going to be the last 2 stories that we read together, The Moon is Down and The Crucible. And this very much models or mirrors the comparative essay, the full-blown essay that you would have written if we were still at school together and doing finals. Now, with this particular assignment, essentially what you're writing is a body paragraph. And that's what I want you to think of when you're doing this. Think of about a body paragraph in length. So you're not going to have an introduction. You're not going to have multiple paragraphs in each one of these comparative analysis paragraphs. You're going to do one today over one prompt and one tomorrow over a separate prompt. And the organization is going to be that of a body paragraph. You're going to have a comparative claim, you're going to have a support from text 1, a support from text 2, a comparative analysis, and then a clincher, which we'll talk about each one of those in more detail and what they're going to include. And additionally, your claim can argue one of 3 different perspectives. You could say that they have a similar view on the prompt, so that both stories offer the same type of perspective or idea about the prompt. You could say that they offer different views or perspectives on the prompt. You could also take a third approach, a more nuanced approach, that they have some similarities and some differences. So essentially, like I said, you're creating a body paragraph. Now, we're going to go through a sample response at this point. So I'm going to flip to a different screen. Now, you have access to this comparative sample response, and it's covering 2 novels that we've already discussed during the first semester, The Call of the Wild and The Great Gatsby. You can see that there's a sample prompt there. It says, in The Call of the Wild and The Great Gatsby, both main characters, Buck and Jay Gatsby, pursue their own version of the American dream. Compare how the characters pursue their dream by evaluating the cost of each character's pursuit. Right? So you can see there the 2 different texts as well as what you're taking a stand on. And so what I want to do is go through and just mark up my answer. Now, you'll get this marked up version on Google Classroom for you to actually look at and review, as well as the outline sample that I'll go through here shortly. So I'm starting with my claim. Like I said, there's no introduction, there's no opening paragraph. We're jumping straight into the claim. And this is the claim. In The Call of the Wild by Jack London and The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, I name both stories, right, which you'll do in your claim. Both novels' main characters display the corruption of the American dream. So what I'm saying is that these 2 stories have a similar perspective, essentially. So they both display the corruption of the American dream by pursuing their dream regardless of the destruction and collateral damage their dream causes. So that's my claim. And then I move into setup for text 1. So this is setup for text 1 in The Great Gatsby. And remember, your setup is where you're going to give your background. And you know what? I just think for the sake of making this a little bit easier, we're going to go more color-coded. So we'll do setups in this lovely green color. All right, so setup is here. This is setup number 1. So I say in The Great Gatsby, Jay's main pursuit is to marry Daisy, the woman of his dreams, which in his mind would complete his mythic vision of the good life. After the climactic confrontation between Jay and Daisy's husband, Tom, right? So there's my context that I'm providing. However, instead of displaying remorse for the death of Myrtle, Jay's only worry is the psychological state of Daisy. And here's my direct support. So support for text 1. So I have my quote. And it's probably best if you use direct quotes. Obviously, it's not required completely, but I think direct quotes with the amount of setup you're giving is going to be more effective. Now I have something in here that you want to make sure you try to include, and I'm going to put this in, let's do orange here, okay? So here is a transition. And I'm transitioning between the 2 stories, right? So this is my transition. I'm connecting story 1 to story 2. And then I go back to setup and support. So here is my setup for text 2. Now I'm talking about the Call of the Wild. While Buck in the Call of the Wild possesses a dramatically different dream, right? After adapting to the harsh life of the Klondike, Buck desires the leadership over the dog sled team. Now I'm giving my context. However, Spitz, the current leader and reigning champion, stands in his way. Buck proceeds to lead a vicious mutiny against the leadership of Spitz, and then I give my direct support here for text number 2. So I've got claim, setup 1, support quote 1, setup 2, direct support 2. And now I move into, we'll move this into blue, my analysis. And it's a comparison. How are they similar or different or some of both? That's essentially what I'm asking or answering when I'm doing my comparison. How are they similar? How are they different? How are they both? No matter their motives, Jay Gatsby and Buck reveal the destructive, corrupt nature of the American dream, since both of their dreams motivate otherwise good individuals to transform into evil, manipulative, and immoral characters. Whether the cost is running over an innocent bystander like Myrtle or obtaining leadership at all cost, Gatsby and Buck refuse to allow the pursuit of their dreams to be constrained by anything other than their primordial nature. Good Call of the Wild there. Word. So that's my comparative analysis. And you'll notice that I'm connecting both texts and both supports together. I think for this particular paragraph, this structure of claim, setup, support for one text, setup, support for the second story, and then one analysis probably works the best. Obviously, you could analyze them separately, especially if you're looking at differences, but at some point you're going to have some comparison. So why make the paragraph longer than it needs to be? That's why I have my comparison and my analysis together. Then at the very end, we'll switch to, what color haven't I used? Let's do this lovely purple color. At the very end, I've got a conclusion. And this conclusion really focuses on why this particular worldview is broken or why this particular worldview is acceptable. Why should we reject it? Why should we receive it? Ultimately, the destructive actions of both Buck and Jay Gatsby must be rejected, right? Now, that's very similar to some of the on-demand writing language that we used with SOAR back with The Moon is Down. So certainly you could bring that in. Now, I'm not asking you to write a big paragraph on that particular point. That's really more of a conclusive statement. So, claim, setup, support, analysis, conclusion. That's the structure. Make sure at some point you have some type of transition connecting the two texts, and that is really the structure. You'll get this document the way it's outlined. I promise I'll post it on Classroom for you. You should be able to find it. Let's go back to the assignment sheet because I want to talk about the specific prompt for the first essay or for the first comparative paragraph. This one is going to be about Mayor Orden and John Proctor. So for prompt number 1, you're focusing on comparing Mayor Orden and John Proctor. And we're talking about martyrdom. So both Mayor Orden in The Moon is Down and John Proctor in The Crucible become martyrs by standing firm for what they believe. They both lose their life by the end of the text. It says, create a paragraph explaining how Mayor Orden and John Proctor have similar or different purposes or reasons for becoming martyrs. So either they have a similar or different purpose or reason for becoming a martyr. How is their view of martyrdom the same or how is it different? You're going to use specific quotes and text to support your claim. In your response, you should consider which character offers the most biblical view of martyrdom and why. Now, this last part, that's the conclusion part. So the part we just talked about with the sample, where we like, do we receive this? Do we reject this? Do we redeem this? That last part of that prompt is where you're going to do that. Now, if you want to create an outline, you can. I haven't created an outline for you, although I sort of have, and we'll look at my example again to show you where that can be found. But you're going to type your response in the space that's provided right there. Now, this is a 15-point assignment. This is not a big essay grade, okay? It's going to go in the fourth quarter grade just like all the other assignments have. You're going to get 10 points for content and ideas and 5 points for style and mechanics. This should be somewhat of a polished piece, so I'm looking for no errors or mistakes. Right? You should be able to polish this paragraph up in the time that you have. Tomorrow, you're going to do a very similar process with a different prompt. So it'll be the same process. You're going to create the same type of paragraph, but it's going to be a different prompt with 2 different characters. One from The Moon is Down, Hint, it's going to be Colonel Lancer. And one from The Crucible. Hint, it's going to be Abigail Williams. And you're going to be looking at both of them through the lens of justice and their views of justice. Okay, I think, and law, right? I think that's a topic that we've certainly addressed fairly frequently with these two stories. Okay, real quick, I'm going to hop back over to my sample response because at the bottom, I created a little outline for you to look at. This sample outline is there for you to go through, and it walks this structure that we've already talked about. So comparative claim names both stories and answers the prompt. You've got your support for text 1, which is going to be the setup and the direct quote. Support text 2, which is the setup for that particular story and the direct quote. And then finally, the comparative analysis. And there's some questions to consider for the comparative analysis. And then finally, the conclusion. I hope that this process is streamlined and easy for you. Again, I want to do some writing to conclude our time together, but I don't want to make it a burden. And I think that these are much smaller little chunks of writing rather than a full-blown essay. That is all I have for today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me via email or stop by office hours today at 2 o'clock, and I will talk to you then. Have a great rest of your day.